Hello, my name is Brant, and today is the 24th day of January 2021. And I wanted to talk about a particular gentleman named George Gurdjieff. Uh, he is known as a spiritual teacher, along with others at this time was Rudolf Steiner, uh, and and then what was I going to say? Was that to do with the issue of man and his divided self? That is somehow is as I would say. These guys would say that Steiner has a different approach. Steiner sees it as a evolution of mankind. It is actually a step each time in a to do with what we call reincarnation, and it was he would just simply call these phases, as well as I recollect, and that man has been going through these things because of um, the pressures that have been put on him to become more and more mature, is what Steiner would say. I don't know if I agree with Steiner. Rudolf Steiner is probably he wrote tons and tons of books. I mean, this guy was a prolific writer, lecturer. He spoke um, when he spoke in Europe. He spoke in Germany. He was part of the Theosophical Society, and then he broke off from that and developed his own school. Well, George Gurdjieff is considered the founder of the Fourth Way, and basically Gurdjieff was did some figured out that basically there were different schools. There was the Sufi, the monk, and the yogi, and this was the Fourth Way. And he would say, basically, upon what is the modern perspective, that is a modern society way of dealing with it. In other words, being a monk, you go to a monastery and you don't work, so you're actually out of work. You're not in the real world. A yogi is the same way, and also a Sufi is the same way. So that they're what we call not living in the real world. That is, I don't mean in a bad way. It's just they've actually isolated themselves. And he is saying that simply is that this we can do it a different way. And what Gurdjieff did, and another particular guy is also who's no longer with us, but is one of the last writers on this similar path, is this gentleman here. Gentleman is called Vernon Howard. He talks similar in these veins also, although he does not come from the George Gurdjieff's perspective or Steiner's perspective. And Steiner's a different ball of wax. But Steiner is considered a I think Steiner was born having the continuity of. He would talk about things that he experiences that he was in the woods that he would encounter as a child. So, and then he didn't forget those things, and so he wasn't estranged from that. He wasn't pulled away from that. He remembered those things. Most of us today, if we do live in a country, we go out in the woods and play, but we don't seem to be able to remember only certain things, very small certain things. What I mean by that, well, for example, me, yeah, I remember the time me and my brother went down the hill that went to a valley behind our house. It was a spring, and it was a lot of snow, and we had a sled. And I remember us going up and down, back and forth, pulling the sled up the hill, and then going down the hill, back and forth. But I don't remember encountering what I would call just a completely a way of just experiencing in itself. That is, you're there, you're in the moment, and you're in the moment not only in that moment, but you're in that moment the next moment. So there's not what we call a for most of us simply is a lag. We will have a moment and then that's it per se. And that's part of the key is simply is that, and moment I say is another word for that would be being, that is being in the moment per se. So back to George Gurdjieff, he was born in Georgia in the Soviet Union. Probably before he was born in they don't really know when he was born, 1870s, 1877, somewhere in that neighborhood. He apparently came from a father who was educated and was himself involved in I think the monastery where he was at in this city he was living in Georgia. He's also considered Armenian, George Gurdjieff. Most people don't know of his name, but would know simply is that it's called, there are places here in the States that are called the Fourth Way. And he has, those have been set up, and there are people who run those things, and they try to help people to deal with certain things. So one of the things they try to do is simply is to self-observe. And that is simply is being able to sit silently and observe your thoughts as they go by you, not what we would call falling into that, which what I would call, maybe psychologists would call that a loop of something in the past would come up, because that's what happens to us. This is part of the inner harmony that Vernon Howard talks about, is that these guys, the issue is simply is we don't have a peace anymore within us. Something's happened to us as we get older. We start remembering things, and there's judgment within ourselves, or there's trauma that we haven't dealt with. There are many different words for it, and this is something I'm trying to grasp, trying to understand. There's other things simply is that what we call the shadows. Part of simply is that things we've pushed down in our lives that we don't want to deal with. You know, we don't want to deal with certain things. And the reason why I'm sharing this is a particular person asked me a question today about just why she pretty much has an issue with, you know, hating particular people. And I won't go any further in that. Is that she was just asking me a question, is that right or wrong? And there's, in some ways, yes, it's wrong to do that because you are putting so much energy into that. And we've forgotten who we are. And that's part of the, what I would call these books I've read. This is by Red Hawk, Self-Remembering, and then Self-Observation. Okay. And then Gurdjieff's particular secretary she wrote this book here, Reality of Being. And what, you see, this is a subject that to me, I'm just touching on it, is because I understand some of it, and I'm trying to learn more about it. And if someone's out there that does know more, maybe they should share it with me, because but I'm trying to put things together, as you would say, as a puzzle. George Gurdjieff was, I don't know many people know this, he went through a pretty rough life in ways, physically that is. He was shot 3 times. And he lived each time. He was able to live, but he sustained a lot of damage to himself. And it was not, at one time simply as both, well, one time he had some doctors watch over him in India. But Gurdjieff traveled not by sea, but by land in what we would call the areas that are near the Caspian Black Sea, in southern part of Russia, Armenia, Georgia, and then would go to other areas, go further to the east. Gurdjieff was one who took trips to the Middle East to watch what was last. See, he was on the last part of what we would call the traditions of men in this spiritualism and spiritual teaching, because religions had come in and basically they were taking over. They were taking over completely. And so these are the people who were in the latter or dying days of these particular spiritual areas. And that was one with the Sufis. The other was with what we call the yogis. And he took notes and watched what was taking place. Maybe similar to what we call the Indians themselves, that there is a dance that Gurdjieff talks about in his books, and that the Indians have dances for certain things. Most of us have no idea what they're doing, but they are doing a dance, so to speak. Well, they are doing a dance for sure. But I'm afraid that most who are doing these dances have no idea what they're doing. That is today. But in the past, there's a possibility that some did know. Gurdjieff also spoke about something that he felt was happening, and he saw it, is that man is machine. Man just tends to, he's not aware of who he is. He's not aware, he's not there. He's somewhere else. He's not even, he's not in the moment. He's never there, present. He's never present, because man's become very mechanical. And we have, very much so. In fact, detrimentally so. And most of us know nothing about this at all. Only I think that some women are able to be able to do that with what I would call intuition in some ways, and knowing who they are deep down. But most men are not even close to this. They're not aware. Men are in worse shape, to me, on a spiritual level than women are. I'm not saying that men are. I'm not saying that women always got things right. No, I'm not saying that men are always wrong neither. But obviously we're missing something, and something happened to us. One would speculate simply was there a cataclysm that took place? That is a terrible thing that hit the planet and caused people, many people lost their lives because of either a flood or something else that did damage to the earth and caused what we would call it. What we were thinking of is that almost all the countries now are separated, but at one time they were all together. And no one knows that. We don't know, per se. Part of it simply is those who control this planet are determined to keep us from knowing who we are. And I think that's critical for us to recognize, simply, is that we do need to know. And so, going back to Gurdjieff, he also experienced what I would call a car accident that almost nearly killed him. So he had dealt with what I would call 4 brushes with death. And but he wrote a lot. He was a very determined person. I don't know, his personality came across in many ways very brash, very in someone's face many times as a teacher. He taught. He started a school that is in Moscow. I'm sorry, in St. Petersburg. In his time frame, right before 1912, before the Russian Revolution, and eventually had to leave in 1917 when the Russian Revolution came into Russia. And he met a gentleman Peter Spinsky, who was also had interest in this and was like a tag team deal that they worked together at first. Eventually, they split. Spinsky went to England, and Gurdjieff stayed in France. They still communicated, but there was definitely some type of rift between the two of them. There are what I call what's the word I want to say here? There are what we call commentaries. That is, a gentleman did a on Gurdjieff and Ouspensky here, psychological commentaries of the teachings of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Maurice Nicole. And this was the book, one of the books. In fact, there are supposed to be like 8 or 10 of them, I think it was. Maurice Nicole was a student of Jung and Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. So this particular guy who wrote these commentaries, was what he did was simply he tried to break what they were talking about into every man's language, and I think that's critical because most people, it took, when he had students in France, it took people, he only had probably no more than 20 or 30 students at the most. And he was not a very easy man to deal with. He was also a very sick man many times. He never was really well almost any time in his life. Not only just to deal with the gunshot wounds, and also to deal with his issue with a car accident, which even made it worse. In the 1920s, he lost his mother in 1925. And in 26, he lost his wife to cancer. At 25, his mother died of liver disease, and actually his wife was after him with cancer a year later. Gurdjieff was very well spoken of. Not when I spoke of him, but he knew many languages. He knew Greek, he knew Turkish, naturally he knew Armenian. He knew Russian. He did not know English that well. He came to America many times, although only to the major cities. That is, I think it was New York and Chicago at that time. And so Gurdjieff's ideas simply are this. And this is why I spend time more and more out in the woods. Part of it simply is to deal with what I call being balanced. Because I'm a Aries. And an Aries is a ram, and I'm also cardinal fire. In fact, I have 2 or 3 planets with cardinal in it. So I have what I call a lot of fire within me. I have a lot of responsibilities too. So I'm trying to figure out different things myself. And then part of it is astrology, and just different things I'm just looking at. And I think what is critical for people is to realize they do have a problem. If they don't see it that way, then they won't wake up. They won't come. And I don't know if that's a good word. I hate the word awake, because awake basically means deaf. So I say aware of what's going on around them. And part of our lives is this way in America, and in fact, almost all the world is based upon a Western perspective now, is busy. It's just busy doing things because no one wants to sit down and be silent. People want to be entertained. That's a red flag, because simply as people get bored, they can't handle the silence. You see, and so what transpires simply is that they have to have something in the background. They have to have music. They have to watch television. They even in their cars they listen to music, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the point simply is that people have a struggle with being with themselves. In fact, I remember reading from some people in the Fourth Way, they would invite people to go out to Colorado, and they would ask them simply is, do not bring any type of don't bring any type of computer type stuff. Don't bring it with you. In other words, don't even, you got your phone, yes, but you need to have that off. But, people will bring their iPad or they'll bring something with them. And it's so much of a temptation that it would keep them away from being silent. You see, it's a temptation because we struggle with being by ourselves. I remember sitting with my dad probably 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and he never really said a whole lot, and I don't know what he was struggling with. I don't know if he was struggling with simply the situations that happened in his life in the past, but he never really opened up to share with me. And, I'd ask questions such and such. He would tell me some things in the past, which was great, but he would never really go deeper. And it's sad. I don't know if he just didn't know who he was, and I think somewhat we're almost on autopilot. We're taught a certain way how to live, and we just go by that. You see, we never ask questions. Am I doing the right thing here? Or, I'm providing for my family, or I'm a good man. I'm a good husband. I don't cheat on my wife. Not, but those are small things here, guys, and women. And it's just that what's going on here simply is that they're just following a protocol. They're just following it. Everything around you is followed. And no one has the ability to stand back and say, what's going on here? What's going on? Why did I feel this way? Well, part of the thing, I'm jumping around, but part of the other thing simply is that we have what we call loops. And I mentioned it earlier, is that we remember either the good times or the bad times. And then we replay them like a cassette player in our minds. And then we remember, the certain relationship, and it didn't work out, and terrible things happen. Or with my mom, I remember her many times saying things, and I'm like, Mom, you need to really kind of get over this. But she would say simply is that I just want to be loved. And my dad wasn't a very loving man. And that was she basically, I understand my mom probably died of a broken heart in many ways. And people will say, well, that's an excuse. That is, people will say, well, she needs to toughen up. People have forgotten about the heart. People really are so much involved in their brain thinking that's actually them, and it's not. A lot of times these accusations that are taking place within you that are, you did something wrong in the past and you're being blamed. Part of that's also programming from either from your family or from church, or, your blame, your shame, and you're guilty. And that's, I got that from people. If I didn't go along with what is going on, even in the last year, people will try to make you feel guilty or shame you. Where did that come from? You see, because it's been done to them. And so they're doing what was happened to them, you see. And so going back to the loop situation is simply is that people have a struggle with being alone. People have a struggle with these loops. They're what's happened in the past, and they hold on to those. So they create their own hell within themselves. For example, children that are actually, are done wrong, sexually abused by their parents or others, is that they blame themselves that they did something wrong. Why, and usually children don't have what we call um, a, a alarm in them or something, because simply they don't know what to do in those situations. They don't. How could they know? Most don't even know how to fight back because they're too young. So how can it be their fault? It can't be their fault. And but they blame themselves. And then if what takes place with them in their lives, something doesn't work out in a relationship, man or woman, they blame themselves. And the accuser's there, within them. So there's a judge within themselves. And so they are many times are in the spell of depression. So they are in depression and they are not living their full lives. They're not there. You see, they're in the past. That's why depression is an issue, because it always usually deals with the past because of what happened to them. And so these guys are trying to deal with certain issues. Part of simply is that none of us know what to do because our parents didn't tell us anything, you see, because they were messed up just like we were. And their parents, their grandparents were messed up too, you see. So they never had what we call a good ground, a good relationship with their parents or their, that type of thing. And so that is spread throughout their lives. In other words, it's part of some of the things you can look at is I've dealt with talking with certain individuals that is to deal with what we call family issues. That is what happened with our grandparents that is still in us because it's part of our DNA. You see, it's in us. The water in our cells have a lot to do with that. You see, and I don't know if any men have actually solved this problem. I don't. I know some women have basically come closer, actually near that, but most men have no idea how to handle it. They just simply bury it. You see. And so George Gurdjieff talked about that, and how those who do rule this world, this planet, are those who want us to be that way. You see, they don't want to get in touch with our real selves. Yeah, a lot of times men have troubles with what we call opening up. That is, they're sharing their feelings and how they really feel because they've never done it before. And society and schooling and church has pushed that boys don't cry. They don't show their heart. They're going to be tough. I'm not saying that they need to be that way all the time, but I do know that something that's why they're divided, because they're not in touch with their heart, you see. So there's no connection here. There's only up here, because that's all they know. So there's no connection with the heart whatsoever. And it's sad, really sad, because basically Gurdjieff says this: they live their lives this way, they die that way. There's nothing there. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. And I wonder sometimes simply is that's why Steiner speaks about simply is that reincarnations is that it's a gradual thing that takes place with reincarnation. He would say simply there's a gradual, it takes a long time, and eventually the spark takes place, and men begin, or women begin to see things, and suddenly they're, oh, I see. But that was Steiner's perspective. That was his very he had a very positive perspective of what he saw was coming. I don't know about that. You see, you see, Steiner would argue going back way back in the past simply is that um, that that men were different, completely different. I mean, women and men are different back then, and now we're different, way different than what we were, thousands of years ago. In other words, basically, you would call it EPOD. Basically, I would assume that it's one, basically over 25,000 years, because basically each age or each astrology, the way it works is that there's roughly 2,160 years per astrology sign. And you multiply that by 12, and it's roughly almost 26,000 years. And that would be what Levette shares with hers, and Victoria talks about that also. With the issue simply is getting off the wheel, that is reincarnation wheel. And so, but I wanted to talk about this. This is something, it's a lot more serious, in depth. I don't have many answers. I do know that simply is that we need to get by ourselves. And I think that's part of the whole deal here the last year with this whole thing with COVID-19 is that we need to be, that's why many people are alone or at home. And some people are going crazy. I know that some people are so sociable that they can't handle being alone. In other words, they cannot stand to be by themselves or with their family all the time. They have to be out and doing something. And that suicides are up. And the suicides are up because of that, but maybe also to do with the financial situation that that the family is in dire straits more now than ever before. But there is an opportunity, and that's part of the reason why I'm out. I go out in the woods simply is to do this. And I think that nature is my only hope. And then I've been listening to a guy named Adam Pants. His name is Jonathan Adam Pants, and he talks about him being in nature and how he was able to, and he's probably the only person I know of that actually understands it and is actually using what he has, the skills, because he's had encounters with nature that most of us never have. You see, has actually been able to have, deer in front of him, and that they don't run from him. So they're not intimidated by him. They don't read his energy as being negative. And I'm sure he says he's been around wild animals too. There's something that basically tells you a lot about someone when they are able to be around animals, and animals do not run. And Adam Pants talks about that. He's got a recent one out here, I guess, last couple of years. It's well worth listening to. It's on the YouTube. Look at him. I've shared it before. But anyway, I just wanted to share about these things. I think these things need to be brought out in the open more. I don't think people have the whole answer. I think people have bits and pieces of the answer, supposedly, but not the whole. I don't think people have the whole piece. I really don't. And if there is, then you're welcome to contact me, and we'll go from there. So, but I thank you for listening, and I wish you a good night, and you take care.